The fluorescent lights in his office made everything look clinical, like an operating room, like somewhere people went to have things cut out of them. I sat across from the most dangerous man in Chicago with my hands folded in my lap so he wouldn't see them shaking. "Close the door," Kieran Blackwell said. His assistant had already left. The door was already closed. He knew that. He just wanted to watch me flinch. I didn't flinch. I'd learned, in the 6 weeks since I'd made the worst smart decision of my life, that flinching around Kieran Blackwell only made things worse. How had I ended up here? The question kept surfacing, the way questions do when you already know the answer and you're just trying to delay facing it. 3 months ago, I was Nadia Voss, 31 years old, broke in the specific way that Chicago winters make worse, working the dinner service at Meridian, one of those restaurants where the lighting is so carefully designed that even the waitstaff look expensive. My daughter Penny was 4. Her father had been gone since before she could walk, not dead, just disappeared into a life that apparently had no room for a baby. I'd stopped being angry about it the same way you stop being angry at weather. It just was. I needed the money. That's the whole setup, really. Every decision that followed started from that single, exhausting fact. He walked in on a Tuesday. I'd been briefed the way you brief someone before a bomb disposal. Quick, tense, lots of eye contact. "Table 12, my manager Hal said, straightening his tie without looking at me. "Kieran Blackwell. Whatever he wants. However long he stays." I knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name, the way everyone knows which neighborhoods you don't cut through after dark. Blackwell, construction, shipping, 3 of the most profitable private clubs downtown. And the other things, the things that didn't show up in business profiles but explained why men like Hal lowered their voice when they said his name. Nothing prepared me for the actual person. He was sitting alone at table 12 when I approached, and the first thing I noticed was that he wasn't performing anything. No phone on the table, no subordinate leaning in to whisper updates. Just a man in a dark suit, reading the menu with the same focused attention I imagined he gave everything. And when he looked up at me, it was with eyes so light against his dark features that for half a second, my whole nervous system forgot what it was supposed to be doing. "Good evening," I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. "Can I start you with something to drink?" He looked at my name tag, then back at my face. Nadia, not a question, not a greeting, just my name, in his mouth, like he was testing the weight of it. "That's me," I said. "What do you recommend?" He set the menu down. He was going to let me choose. I understood vaguely that this was a form of power, letting someone else make the decision, then watching how they made it. I recommended the duck. He ordered it without hesitation. He stayed until last call, conducting quiet meetings at that corner table, and every time I came to refill his water, he stopped whatever he was doing until I left. Not rudely, deliberately. Like he was drawing a line between the conversation and me. When I brought the check, I found a folded piece of paper beneath the signed receipt. My phone number, written in his handwriting, except I hadn't given it to him. He'd left a $400 tip on a $200 bill. I almost returned it. I stood outside in my coat with my breath clouding in the November cold, watching the black car pull away, and I almost ran after it. But then I thought about Penny's asthma medication, about the gas bill, about the way my checking account looked like an apology. I went home and didn't sleep. 2 days later, a car seat arrived at my apartment. Brand new, top safety rating, still in the box, no note, I knew anyway. I sat on my kitchen floor next to the box for a long time. Then a week of dinners, Kieran back at table 12 twice, 3 times, always requesting my section, always watching in that careful, unreadable way. Between visits, things kept appearing. A grocery delivery from Whole Foods with everything on it that I'd once mentioned to a coworker was too expensive, but wouldn't it be nice? An envelope of cash slid under my door with a note that just said, "For Penny's doctor," in handwriting I now recognized. I should have been scared. I was scared. But I was also, and I hate that this is true, I hate admitting this, I was also paying my bills on time for the first time in 2 years. So when he called, I answered. "Have dinner with me," he said. No preamble. "Not at Meridian, Mr. Blackwell, Kieran." I gripped the phone. "I have a daughter." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to forget that." I went. That dinner led to another. Private rooms in restaurants I'd never have been able to afford on my own, always with his security at the edges of the room. always controlled, always on his terms. I told myself I was just enjoying it. I told myself I understood what I was doing. I told myself a lot of things. Then came the afternoon that shattered every careful thing I'd built around myself. I'd met an FBI agent named Cardwell outside a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue. He'd approached me outside Penny's preschool, which still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. The specific violation of it, someone watching where my child goes to school. He said he had questions about Blackwell. He said I could be helpful. He said words like cooperation and protection, and showed me photographs I wish I could unsee. When I got home, Kieran's car was already parked outside my building. I knew, looking at it, that somehow he already knew. And now I was here, in his office that smelled like cedar and old money, with his eyes on me like a forensic exam and a manila folder on the desk between us, that I was fiercely certain contained evidence of exactly where I'd been that afternoon. "Tell me," Kieran said, "who you met with today." The thing about Kieran Blackwell was that he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The danger in him was quiet. The kind of quiet that preceded something enormous, a held breath before the pressure drop. I'd been around enough barely contained things in my life to recognize it. "I didn't seek him out," I said. "I know you didn't." He leaned forward, his forearms on the desk, and the shift in posture changed the temperature of the whole room. "But you sat with him for 40 minutes, Nadia. You didn't walk away, so I need you to tell me what was said." "He had photographs," I said. My voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Of people, of what happens to people who—" I stopped. "Who cross me." I nodded. Kieran stood. He moved away from the desk, toward the windows, and I watched his reflection in the dark glass, the tight set of his jaw, the way he ran one hand over his face before he composed himself again. "And what did you tell him?" "Nothing." I stood too, needing to not be sitting while he was standing, needing whatever small amount of equal ground I could claim. "I told him nothing, Kieran. He asked about your warehouses on the south side. He asked about the Fenwick deal. I said I didn't know anything about either, which is true, and I left." He turned from the window. The look on his face was complicated. I'd expected cold fury. What I saw instead was something rawer than that, something that looked almost like relief fighting with anger for the same real estate. "He offered you something," Kieran said. "Protection. A way out." I didn't answer. "Did you consider it?" I met his eyes. For about 40 seconds, something moved through his expression. "Why only 40 seconds? Because Penny was in the coffee shop with me," I said quietly. She was coloring at the table. And I looked at her, and I thought about starting over somewhere with a new name, and I thought, she doesn't know her name is new. She doesn't know what she's hiding from. And I couldn't do that to her. Kieran crossed the room in 4 steps, not toward me, to the small bar cart by the bookshelf, where he poured 2 glasses of bourbon without asking. He set one in front of me on the desk and kept the other. "Cardwell isn't interested in justice," he said. "He's been building a case against my family for 4 years with nothing to show for it. You were a shortcut. That's all you are to him." I gathered that. "He'll try again. I know. And next time he might not approach you politely." He said this the way someone says the weather forecast. Factual, slightly grim, but navigable if you plan for it. I picked up the bourbon. My hands had stopped shaking sometime in the last few minutes, which surprised me. "Where's Penny?" The question landed between us. Kieran's jaw tightened. "She's safe. She's at my apartment with my housekeeper, Margot. She's been there since 4 o'clock. The floor dropped out from under me. "You took my daughter. I ensured her safety," said. The same correction, the same steely tone. "While her mother was sitting across from a federal agent. You had no right. You have no idea," he said, and now there was an edge in his voice. The first real one. What Cardwell's people are capable of using to apply pressure. A child in an unsecured apartment while you're being surveilled is not a risk I was willing to take. I set the bourbon down. My hands were shaking again. "Take me to her," I said. "Right now." He looked at me for a long moment, then he said, "She's fine. She and Margot made macaroni and cheese from scratch, which Penny apparently found hilarious. She asked Margot if she could call me to ask when you'd be there." He paused. "She called me Kieran." I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know what to do with any of it, the rage and the terror, and the fact that underneath both of them was something that felt, shamefully, like warmth, that she'd asked for him. "I need to see her," I said. "Then let's go." The drive to his building on the Gold Coast happened mostly in silence. Kieran sat beside me in the back of the car, not touching me, but close enough that I was aware of every breath he took. The city slid past the windows, November dark and glittering. "How long have you been watching her preschool?" I asked. "Since the night Cardwell's team first showed interest in you," he said. 3 weeks ago. "You knew 3 weeks ago?" "Yes." "And you didn't tell me." "I didn't want to frighten you," he said. "That was a mistake. I'm aware of that." I looked at him. He was staring out his window, and in profile he looked like something carved, angular and certain of itself. But his hands, folded in his lap, were too still, the way hands get when someone is actively making them stay calm. "You could have told me," I said. "I can handle frightening things. I've been handling frightening things alone for 4 years." He looked over at me then, and the expression on his face was, I didn't have a word for it. Not quite guilt, more like recognition. Like something I'd said had matched a frequency he'd been broadcasting without knowing it. "I know," he said quietly. His apartment was on the 42nd floor, and when the elevator opened, Penny came running. She was still in her preschool clothes, her dark hair loose from whatever braid I'd done that morning, and she launched herself at me the way 4-year-olds do, completely committed, no hedging, and I caught her and held on. "Margot let me put cheese on top," she reported. "The real kind that gets crunchy." "That's the best kind," I said into her hair. When I looked up, Kieran was standing a few feet away, and he was watching Penny with an expression so unguarded that it almost embarrassed me to see it, like I'd walked in on something private. Later, after Penny had finished the macaroni she'd saved for me, after she'd shown me every room she'd been permitted to see, after Margot had given me a small, warm smile that communicated something I wasn't ready to interpret, I got Penny settled in a guest room that was too tasteful and adult for a child, but that she found thrilling. "A real duvet," she kept saying. "A real duvet." When I came back to the main room, Kieran was standing at the window with a glass of wine and the posture of someone who'd been thinking hard for a long time. "Ask me what you want to ask," he said, without turning around. I sat on the edge of the couch. "Who are you really? Not the file, not what Cardwell showed me, not the reputation." I paused. "I'm trying to understand why I should trust you." He turned then. He set his wine down and crossed to the seating area and sat across from me, elbows on his knees. Not the power position, not the controlled executive pose, just a man trying to figure out where to start. "My father built this business," he said. "Not legally, not cleanly. There were things he did, things his people did, that I was 16 years old the first time I understood what my last name actually meant in certain rooms." He was quiet for a moment. "He died 4 years ago, heart attack. No drama, no betrayal, just gone. And I took over because if I hadn't, someone worse would have. That's a convenient story," I said. "It's a true one." He didn't flinch. "The warehouses Cardwell asked you about. 2 of them are clean now. Fully legal. I've been moving things for 3 years. It's slow. It makes people who liked the old way very unhappy." His eyes met mine, which is part of why Cardwell is pushing now. He can feel the target getting smaller. "And the parts that aren't clean yet?" He was quiet. "Kieran, there are operations I haven't been able to close without the right infrastructure in place," he said carefully. "Gambling. Some import business that skirts regulations. Nothing involving people. That line I don't cross us." He said it the same way the original man had said no drugs. Flat, final, non-negotiable. "Within a year, if things continue the way they're going, the Blackwell name will be attached to nothing Penny's school friends' parents could object to. And until then, he said, you and Penny are safer with me than you are without me. That's not a threat, that's arithmetic." I looked at him for a long time. "Cardwell showed me pictures of men who crossed you. I know what he showed you. Have you?" "Yes," he said. Simple. No justification, no softening. I exhaled. "Can that stop?" He was quiet for longer this time. "I can promise you it won't follow us home," he said finally. "I can promise you that Penny will never live in its shadow. I can promise you I'm working toward a version of this business where it's not necessary." He paused. "I can't promise you it's already over. That would be a lie, and I won't lie to you. It wasn't what I wanted to hear. But it was honest, and I'd been lied to by careful men before, and I knew the difference between someone managing my perception and someone telling me an uncomfortable truth because they'd decided I deserved it." "Why me?" I asked. You could have anyone. Something softened in his face. Not in a theatrical way, in the way of someone who's been asked the question they weren't sure they were allowed to answer. The night you brought my check, he said, you looked at me the way people look at the weather. Not afraid of me specifically, just assessing, figuring out how to navigate it. He almost smiled. Everyone else in that restaurant was watching to see what I'd do. You were just trying to get through your shift. And when I said your name, you looked annoyed. I didn't. You looked annoyed, he repeated, and now, he did smile, brief and real. Like I was making your job harder. I hadn't made anyone look at me like that since I was in high school. I felt something loosen in my chest without my permission. I've been alone a long time, he said, quieter. By design, it seemed practical. And then I walked into Meridian for a business meeting, and you recommended the duck, and I spent the rest of the evening trying to figure out why I didn't want to leave. I looked down at my hands. Outside the windows, the city stretched out, 42 floors of it, every light a life happening separately from this one. I need to tell you something, I said. And I need you to hear it before you tell me what you're offering, he waited. Penny comes first, I said. Not in an abstract way, not as a principle, actually first. If anything you do, anything you are, starts to pull her toward the parts of your world I don't want her near, I leave, I don't negotiate. I don't give you a second chance to course correct, I leave. I met his eyes. Can you live with that condition? He didn't hesitate. Yes. And I'm not. I'm not an accessory. I'm not a project. If this is about what I can become with your resources, I'm not interested. It's not. I need to be a partner, or I need to be gone. He leaned forward slightly. Nadia, I spent 20 minutes this evening watching you eat cold macaroni and cheese that your 4-year-old saved for you, and looking at me like I was supposed to understand what a gift that was. His voice was low. I understand what a gift that is. I didn't say anything for a moment. You prepared a room for her, I said. Margot said you've had the guest room set up for weeks. He didn't look apologetic. I like to be ready. That's not normal behavior. No, he agreed. I stood. He stood too, and we were closer than I'd let us be in any of the careful dinners and controlled meetings over the past weeks. This close, I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the way the lamplight caught the gray threaded through his dark hair at the temples. I'm not saying yes to anything tonight, I said. I know. I need to think. I need to sleep somewhere that isn't 42 floors above everything familiar. Margot will drive you home in the morning, he said. Stay tonight so Penny doesn't have to wake up and move. He stepped back, giving me space. No conditions. I stayed. In the guest room next to Penny's, I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling, and made the kind of list you make at 2 in the morning when you're trying to be rational about something your body has already decided. Reasons to run. Still too many to count. Reasons to stay. Fewer, but heavier. Penny's sleeping face. The way she'd called him Kieran without ceremony. The way kids do when they've decided someone belongs in the category of known safe things. The way Kieran had looked at her. Like she was something he'd been careful not to hope for. In the morning, I found him in the kitchen, already dressed, making coffee with the specific focus of someone who treats every task like it has stakes. Penny was on the counter next to the coffee maker, legs dangling, supervising. She says you take it with milk, he said when he heard me. She's right. Penny beamed like she'd accomplished something. I sat at the kitchen island and let him hand me the coffee, and tried not to think about how easy it felt, how terrifyingly easy, to be in this kitchen with this man and this mug, and my daughter's legs swinging against the cabinet. I've been thinking, I said. He set his own mug down and looked at me. I want to see the legitimate side of what you're building, I said. Not just hear about it. I want to understand where things actually are, how far along, what the real timeline looks like, before I make any decisions. He nodded slowly. That's fair. And I want to talk to Margot alone, also fair, and I need you to understand that I'm not making a decision today or this week. I stopped. Tried again. I'm open. That's what I can give you right now. I'm open. Kieran looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, That's more than I expected to have 24 hours ago. Penny slid off the counter and attached herself to my side. Are we staying? She asked. Not today, I said, looking at Kieran over her head. But we're coming back. He held my gaze like he was memorizing it. Yes, he said quietly. You are. The weeks that followed were the strangest of my life, not because everything changed. Things changed slowly, incrementally, which was somehow harder to track and harder to argue with. Penny and I kept our apartment. I kept working at Meridian, though Kieran's expression every time I mentioned it suggested he was exercising significant restraint on that subject. He didn't push. He said he wouldn't, and he didn't. What he did do, show me. One afternoon, he brought me to the offices of Blackwell Development on Michigan Avenue. Not the shadowed back operations, but the actual offices, glass and clean lines, and a staff of 40 people who clearly had no idea what the company's history contained. He walked me through the real estate portfolio, the construction contracts, the community development initiatives. The Blackwell name was on 3 affordable housing projects on the south side. One of them had a community garden. "This is what the last 3 years have built," he said, standing at the window of the conference room, looking out over the city. "This is the part I want to keep." I watched his face. "You're proud of it." "Yeah," he said it simply, like a man not used to admitting to pride. "I am." Later, over dinner in the kitchen of his apartment, we'd started doing that, informal. Penny at the counter doing her pre-K homework while we cooked, which was a domestic tableau so completely at odds with how this had started, that I sometimes had to stop and just breathe through it. I asked the question I'd been carrying for weeks. "Why'd you never have a family before now? You're 41. You clearly want this." He was quiet for a moment, stirring something on the stove. "After my father died, I spent 2 years cleaning up what he left behind, not just the business. He had other obligations, other families, other places, other people he'd kept separate from us. Finding out about all of it took time." He set the spoon down. "I swore I would never do what he did, that I would never build something with someone if there were parts of my life I had to keep hidden from them." He looked over at me. "That took until now to be possible. And now it's possible." "Almost," he said carefully. "Close enough that you deserve to know where things actually stand." I turned that over. "That's why you were so direct about the parts that aren't clean yet." "Yes." I went back to chopping vegetables. After a moment I said, "My dad left when I was 7. Not the same as yours, just didn't want the responsibility. I grew up very familiar with the concept of men who compartmentalize." "I know. Do you?" "I know it's why you keep waiting for me to show you what I'm hiding," he said. "There will come a point when you understand that the answer is nothing. I'm trying to get us to that point." Penny looked up from her worksheet. "What's compartmentalize? It's when you keep your toys in separate bins." Kieran told her, completely serious. Instead of mixing them together, she considered this. "Oh, that's smart, actually." He looked over at me. I looked back. Something shifted, quietly and irreversibly, and I didn't try to stop it. The formal debut happened 6 weeks later, a charity auction for the new pediatric wing of Northwestern Memorial, organized by the Blackwell Foundation. Kieran in a tuxedo, me in a dress I'd bought myself specifically to feel like the version of myself that made choices rather than survived them. Penny was home with Margot, having extracted a promise of hot chocolate and 2 extra stories. We stood in the entry of the venue, and I watched the room clock Kieran's arrival the way rooms do for certain people, a subtle adjustment, a shifting of attention, a recalibration. He didn't seem to notice, or he noticed and had decided it wasn't interesting. "You do this often?" I asked. "Events like this, increasingly." He looked down at me. "It's strange. I spent years avoiding rooms like this. And now I have a reason to be in them." He offered his arm. "Ready?" I took it. We stayed 3 hours. I talked to a pediatric cardiologist about Bessie Rich, and to a city alderman about zoning reform, and to a woman from the Tribune who wanted to write about the Southside housing projects. Kieran moved through it all beside me, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes watching from across the room, with an expression I'd only recently started being able to read. Present, attentive, quietly certain. On the car ride home, his hand found mine in the dark of the back seat. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. 3 months later, Penny started kindergarten in a school near the house Kieran had found outside Evanston. An actual house with an actual yard, with a swing set he'd assembled himself on a Saturday, while I watched from the porch with coffee and tried not to find it as devastating as I did. She made a best friend named Juniper within the first week, and came home talking about her the way kids talk about people they intend to know forever. Kieran came for dinner 4 nights a week. sometimes 5. On the nights he was there, Penny insisted on showing him her schoolwork before bed, and he sat at the kitchen table and looked at her drawings with exactly the same attention he gave quarterly financial reviews, which was the most telling thing I'd ever seen anyone do. I was falling in love with him. I'd been falling for a while. I'd just been too busy cataloging reasons to be careful to say it out loud, he said at first. A February evening, Penny asleep, snow against the windows, the kind of quiet that settles when there's nothing required of anyone. He was on the couch reading something, and I was grading the online music theory course I'd enrolled in January, and he put his book down and said, without preamble, "I'm in love with you." I looked up. "I wanted you to know," he said. "No agenda, no ask, just, you should know." I set my laptop aside. "I know," I said, "and I'm in love with you too." I paused. "It took me a while to say it because it still scares me. What scares you?" "That something will happen to break it," I said honestly. "That I'll be in a year or two and realize I missed something. That you'll become someone I didn't see coming." He crossed the room and sat beside me, and he took my face in his hands the way he did sometimes, like he wanted to be paying full attention to whatever happened next. "I'm going to show you," he said, "for however long it takes, that I'm exactly who you think I am." I believed him. That was the terrifying and galvanizing part. After everything, I believed him. A Sunday in April. The yard had finally lost its winter gray, and Penny was out on the swing set, her voice carrying through the kitchen window in that particular pitch children use when they're in their own world. Kieran was making breakfast. I was sitting at the kitchen table in his sweatshirt, which had become a habit I'd stopped apologizing for. He said, without turning from the stove, "There's something in my jacket pocket." I looked at him. "What?" "In my jacket, on the hook." I got up. His jacket was by the door, dark wool, and in the inside pocket was a small velvet box, the color of midnight. I stood holding it for a moment. "Open it," he said, still with his back to me, still at the stove, and I thought, this is a man who gives people room to decide things, who puts something in front of you and steps back. I opened it. The ring was a sapphire, deep blue, flanked by 2 small diamonds. It was nothing like the enormous declaration I might have once imagined receiving. It was exactly the kind of ring someone would choose if they knew me. I looked up. He'd turned around. "We don't have to decide anything today," he said, "but I wanted you to see it. I wanted you to know what I'm asking." "I know what you're asking," I said. "Nadia, yes," I said. "The answer is yes." The back door banged open, and Penny came in trailing mud and the cold smell of April, and stopped when she saw us. Me holding the velvet box, Kieran crossing the kitchen toward me. "What's that?" she demanded. Kieran crouched down to her level. He did this, sometimes, folded himself down to where she was, because he understood instinctively that certain conversations happen better when you're not towering over someone. "I asked your mom if she'd marry me," he said. Penny looked at me. I held up the box. She looked at the ring for a long moment with the profound seriousness of a 5-year-old evaluating something important. "Does that mean you live here for real?" she asked him. "If that's okay with you," he said. She thought about it. Then she nodded, once, with finality, like a decision reached at a board meeting. "Okay, but you have to stop putting the mugs on the wrong shelf." "Fair enough," he said, and he was laughing, and so was I, and Penny went to wash her hands at the sink completely unbothered, and I let Kieran slide the ring onto my finger in our kitchen in the middle of an ordinary April morning, and it fit perfectly, because of course it did, because he'd been paying that kind of attention all along. I stood in that kitchen and thought about the fluorescent lights in his office, where I'd been so sure I was trapped, and I thought about how sometimes the cage you think you're in is actually just a room, and the door's been open the whole time, and what you have to decide isn't whether to run, but whether you trust the person standing next to it. I trusted him. I'd chosen him. And against every reasonable expectation I'd built around myself over the years of going it alone, that turned out to be the most sensible thing I'd ever done.